Max Verstappen looked almost 7/10 slower than Ferrari in Hungary, but one hidden comparison exposes a completely different story. He was only 193 thousandths behind Lando Norris on the decisive soft tire run, while Lewis Hamilton suddenly pushed Ferrari to the top with a 1 minute, 18.729. That means Red Bull may not have collapsed at all. Ferrari may have made the real performance leap. But Verstappen's rear axle locking complaint appeared at the exact moment his gap to first place grew by more than 2/10, and that connection reveals where Red Bull's true weakness may be hiding. Subscribe to the channel. The first practice session made Red Bull look far stronger than the final headline suggested. Charles Leclerc set the fastest time for Ferrari with a lap of 1 minute, 19.075 seconds. Max Verstappen finished second. His lap was 1 minute, 19.559. The gap was 484 thousandths of a second. That is less than half a second. And on a normal Friday, that would look like a solid starting point. But the real value of that lap only becomes clear when the rest of the session is compared around it. Lewis Hamilton finished third for Ferrari. His time was 1 minute, 19.618. That placed him 543 thousandths behind Leclerc. In other words, Verstappen was actually closer to the fastest Ferrari than Hamilton was. He separated the two Ferrari drivers. And that is the first detail most people missed. Ferrari had the fastest car in the session, but Verstappen placed the Red Bull directly between both of its drivers. That does not prove Red Bull was faster overall. Practice sessions are never perfectly equal. Different fuel loads, different tire preparation, and different run plans can change the meaning of every lap. The source does not provide those hidden details. So the times cannot be treated like a complete race result. But they still reveal something important. Verstappen was extracting real performance from the car. He was not buried in the midfield. He was not searching for a full second. He was close enough to the leader to make the Red Bull look competitive. And there was another comparison inside the same garage. Isaac Hadjar finished fourth in the other Red Bull. His lap was 1 minute, 19.997. That left him 922 thousandths behind Leclerc. Verstappen was more than 4/10 faster than his teammate. Again, the exact programs may have been different. The source does not say they were running identical fuel or tire plans. But the final times still create a revealing picture. The Red Bull was capable of reaching near the front. Verstappen was the driver placing it there. And that creates a dangerous illusion. When the car looks strong in Verstappen's hands, it becomes easy to assume the package itself is working properly. But a great driver can hide weaknesses. He can change his braking point. He can adjust his line. He can control the throttle more carefully. He can make tiny corrections before the instability becomes obvious to anyone watching. The lap time looks clean. The struggle remains hidden. That is why one fast lap does not always mean the driver trusts the car. It may only mean the driver found a way around the problem. And the morning data contains another useful detail. Verstappen completed 25 laps. Leclerc also completed 25. Hadjar completed the same number. So this was not a case where Verstappen set one quick lap and spent the rest of the session in the garage. He completed a full program comparable in lap count to the fastest Ferrari and the other Red Bull. That gave Red Bull a substantial amount of data. It also made Verstappen's performance harder to dismiss as a single fortunate moment. He spent the session gathering information. He reached second place. He stayed closer to Leclerc than Hamilton did. And yet the day would soon move in a very different direction. This is where the numbers begin to create tension. Because if Red Bull was genuinely close in first practice, why did the gap to the leader grow in the afternoon? Was Verstappen becoming slower? Was the setup moving in the wrong direction? Or did Ferrari suddenly find something the rest of the field could not match? The obvious answer is to look at the final positions. Second in the morning. Fourth in the afternoon. That looks like decline. But positions can be misleading. A driver can become faster and still fall backward if the rivals improve by more. Imagine standing on a moving walkway at an airport. You begin beside another person. Then their walkway speeds up. You are still moving forward. You may even be moving faster than before. But the distance between you grows. From the outside, it looks like you slowed down. The real change happened somewhere else. That is exactly why Verstappen's Friday cannot be understood through position alone. The field moved. Ferrari moved the most. And Red Bull's true situation was hidden inside the difference between the leader's gap and the gap to the next rival. But before that afternoon comparison is revealed, the morning session leaves one final clue. Verstappen's car had enough pace to sit second. It had enough pace to beat Hamilton. It had enough pace to finish more than 4/10 ahead of the other Red Bull. That means the foundation was there. The car was not completely lost. The more important question was whether that speed could be repeated when the track improved and the fastest teams used the soft tire more aggressively. Because second practice would not simply test Red Bull against Ferrari. It would test whether Verstappen's pace was stable. And when the benchmark dropped into the 1 minute, 18-second range, the gap suddenly looked far more serious. But the largest part of that change did not come from where most people expected. Second practice changed the entire picture, but not for the reason most people assumed. Lewis Hamilton set the fastest time for Ferrari with a lap of 1 minute, 18.729 seconds. Charles Leclerc followed in second. His lap was 1 minute, 18.877. The difference between the two Ferrari drivers was only 148 thousandths of a second. That is an important detail. Ferrari did not rely on one exceptional lap from one driver. Both cars moved to the front. Both cars entered the 1 minute, 18-second range. And both cars finished ahead of Verstappen. That is why the headline gap suddenly looked so dramatic. Verstappen ended the session 692 thousandths behind Hamilton. Almost 7 tenths. Compared with the morning, his gap to first place had grown by just over 2 tenths of a second. The immediate reaction is obvious. Red Bull must have gone backward. But that conclusion ignores the most revealing comparison of the entire day. On Verstappen's decisive soft tire run, he was only 193 thousandths behind Lando Norris. Less than 2 tenths. That is not a small detail. It changes the entire diagnosis. Because Verstappen was not almost 7 tenths behind everyone. He was almost 7 tenths behind Hamilton. Against Norris, the gap was much smaller. And that suggests the biggest performance jump came from Ferrari. Think of it like a school race. 3 runners begin close together. One runner suddenly accelerates far more than the others. The second and third runners remain close to each other, but both appear much farther behind the leader. If you only measure the distance to first place, it looks like both of them slowed down. But they did not necessarily slow down. The leader simply found more speed. That is what the second practice data appears to show. Ferrari raised the benchmark. McLaren improved enough to stay near the front. Red Bull remained close to McLaren, while the gap to Ferrari grew dramatically. And this is where the hidden difference becomes huge. The 692 thousandth gap creates the impression that Red Bull had fallen away from the entire leading group. The 193 thousandth gap to Norris suggests something very different. Red Bull was still close to at least one of its major rivals. The real separation happened between Ferrari and everyone behind. That does not mean Red Bull had a perfect session. It does not remove Verstappen's technical complaints. And it does not prove the car was capable of matching Ferrari. But it does mean the final classification can be misleading when viewed without context. Fourth place sounds disappointing after second place in the morning. Yet Verstappen briefly climbed to third during the session. He was inside the leading group before Ferrari and McLaren improved in the final part of the run. That matters because it shows the Red Bull had not simply disappeared. The pace was present. But it was not developing at the same rate as Ferrari's pace. And in Formula One, that difference can decide an entire weekend. A team does not only need a fast starting point. It needs to improve as the track improves. The surface gains grip. The drivers become more confident. The teams refine their setups. Tire preparation becomes more precise. The competitive order can change quickly. Ferrari appeared to respond to that changing track more effectively than Red Bull. Hamilton reached the top. Leclerc stayed close behind. Verstappen was pushed to fourth. But even then, the smaller gap to Norris suggested Red Bull had not suffered a total collapse. The problem was more specific. Ferrari had moved the target. Red Bull had not moved far enough with it. And that distinction matters because the solution is different. If Red Bull had fallen behind the entire field, the team would be facing a broad performance crisis. The car would need more grip everywhere. More speed everywhere. A complete rethink. But if Ferrari alone made the largest leap, Red Bull's problem becomes narrower. The team must understand why Ferrari found so much time. And it must decide whether Verstappen's own car still had performance trapped inside it. That second question became much more serious because of what Verstappen reported over the radio. During the same session in which the gap to first place increased, he complained about rear axle locking under braking. That is the connection Red Bull could not ignore. The relative gap became larger. The technical complaint became more specific. And both happened in the afternoon. The source does not prove that the rear axle locking caused every part of the extra gap. There were too many other variables. Ferrari improved. The track evolved. Different cars may have used different fuel loads and run plans. The source does not provide those hidden details. But the timing and the complaint moved in the same direction. In the morning, Verstappen was 484 thousandths behind the leader. In the afternoon, he was 692 thousandths behind. The difference was 208 thousandths, just over 2/10. That additional deficit appeared in the same session where Verstappen identified a braking problem. That is not a final diagnosis, but it is a pattern. And patterns are where Formula One teams begin looking for answers. Rear axle locking sounds like one isolated issue. In reality, it can affect almost every important part of a lap. When Verstappen presses the brake pedal, the weight of the car moves forward. The front tires are asked to slow the car. The rear becomes lighter. If the rear axle begins locking, the back of the car can become nervous. It may feel as though it wants to slide. That forces the driver to protect the corner entry. He may release the brake pressure slightly earlier. He may turn in with less aggression. He may wait before returning to the throttle. Each adjustment costs only a small amount of time. But those losses spread. A compromised braking phase damages the entry. A weak entry changes the middle of the corner. A poor middle creates a slower exit. And at the Hungaroring, the next corner arrives quickly. The original problem follows the driver through the entire sequence. Imagine missing the first step while running up a staircase. You may recover. But now every step after that feels rushed. The mistake grows. That is why a braking problem can create a lap time loss larger than the braking zone itself. And this makes the 193 thousandth gap to Norris even more interesting. If Verstappen was less than 2/10 behind McLaren while managing rear axle locking, how much performance remained inside the Red Bull? That is the question the final standings could not answer. Perhaps the car was genuinely only a fraction behind Norris. Perhaps Verstappen was extracting more than the setup naturally allowed. Perhaps the braking problem cost exactly the margin Red Bull needed to move back into third. The source does not provide enough information to prove any one of those conclusions. But it does support the central tension. Verstappen remained close to Norris despite reporting a clear technical limitation. That suggests the Red Bull still had competitive potential. The danger was that Verstappen could not access it cleanly. And there is a major difference between having pace and being able to use pace. A car can be fast for one lap. A driver may find the correct braking points once. The tires may enter the perfect temperature window. The balance may feel manageable for a few corners. But qualifying demands repeatability. The driver must trust that the same inputs will produce the same reaction every time. If the rear axle locks unpredictably, that trust disappears. Verstappen cannot simply decide to find 2/10. Those 2/10 may be trapped in the exact part of the lap where the car feels least stable. And this is where the smaller gap becomes both encouraging and worrying. Encouraging, because Red Bull remained close to McLaren. Worrying, because Verstappen may have been close despite the car's behavior. A healthy car gives the driver speed naturally. A difficult car forces the driver to manufacture speed. Those can produce similar lap times in practice. But under qualifying pressure, the difference becomes obvious. The healthy car allows commitment. The difficult car demands compromise. And the Hungaroring punishes compromise. There are too many linked corners. Too few places to recover. Too much dependence on rhythm. A driver must feel that the car is moving with him, not fighting him. The data therefore created a much bigger question than the final position suggested. Was Red Bull actually slower than McLaren? Or was Verstappen's braking problem hiding how close the car really was? And even more importantly, was Ferrari's advantage permanent? Hamilton's fastest lap changed the reference completely. Leclerc confirmed Ferrari's strength by finishing second. But one practice session cannot answer whether that advantage would remain in qualifying or over a race distance. The source only establishes the Friday timing. It does not provide long-run data or complete telemetry. So Red Bull could not assume Ferrari was untouchable. But it also could not ignore the scale of Ferrari's improvement. That left the team with two urgent tasks. Understand the Ferrari jump. And unlock the speed Verstappen may still have been carrying inside the Red Bull. The first task depended on comparison. The second depended on trust. And trust was the bigger problem. Because Verstappen had already shown he could place the car near the front. He had done it in the morning. He had briefly reached third in the afternoon. He had remained within 193 thousandths of Norris on the decisive soft tire comparison. The performance was not invisible. It was unstable. That is what made the situation so dangerous. Red Bull was not searching for speed from nothing. The team was searching for a way to make existing speed usable. And the next clue would show why Verstappen's own driving may have been hiding just how difficult that task had become.